Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to have heard about this UNESCO conference from my good friend and colleague, Professor Pat Dolan, UNESCO Professor in NUI Galway, whom I've had the privilege of working with since I became Minister for Children and Youth Affairs in Ireland a year and a half ago. I wish you very good thinking and success at this conference on this most important topic. I became Minister, as I said, a year and a half ago. It's a full cabinet position in Ireland, the first time ever that we've had a senior minister. We've had it as a junior position before. And the reason I can't be with you today is because I'm in the middle of a referendum campaign in Ireland to articulate children's rights in the Constitution for the first time ever. Children are hardly mentioned in our Constitution, and on the 10th of November, Irish citizens will be asked to rectify that, to support an amendment which I'm putting to the people, supported by government. It's been a priority of government. And we do have a 20-year history of problems in this area and 17 major reports. But I will be putting the referendum to the people, as I said, on the 10th of November, articulating in the Constitution for the first time ever that children would be recognised as individual rights holders, very much in line with the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. That we will be very clear in this new constitutional amendment about how we protect children, clarity about children who are abused or neglected and state intervention. I'll also be dealing in that constitutional amendment with some inequalities in our constitution at the moment, where children of marital and non-marital parents are treated differently in relation to adoption. But very importantly, I'll also be asking the Irish people to support a reference in our Constitution that the best interests of the child should be paramount in decisions affecting that child, in court cases where adoption's being discussed, access, custody, all of those key issues that affect children's lives. And I'm also putting in to the article that changes our Constitution that the views and the voices of the child, depending on their age and maturity, should be heard in all decisions that affect them in these important court cases. So it's a referendum about children. A new article called Children will be put into our Constitution if the people support it. And so far I've got cross-party support in our Parliament, very interesting debates in our Dáil, which is our Parliament, and our Senate, over many hours in recent weeks. So it will now be up to the people. The referendum has got good support so far, but there are people who object. There are people who say you shouldn't give children individual rights, that it undermines the family. There are people who say that we shouldn't be spelling out this as clearly as we are. But I'm certainly hoping that on the 10th of November that people will support this strong statement about children's rights in the Irish Constitution. Of course, when I speak about children, I'm talking about children and young people up to the age of 18. So this referendum is about young children right up to 18, and it would affect all of those 1.1 million children in Ireland, specifically targeted at our most vulnerable children, of course, but a very symbolic statement, and also a statement in our Constitution that would have practical implications about how our children and young people are dealt with in a whole variety of settings, particularly in court settings where key decisions are being taken about our children and young people. Professor Pat Dolan is there with you, and if you have questions in relation to the referendum, I know he would be delighted, as a strong supporter of the referendum, he would be delighted to answer any questions about our forthcoming referendum. Of course, constitutional change is but one aspect of change for children. You also have to look at the resources any country is willing to invest. You have to look at best practice. You have to look what you're doing for all of the different age groups. And in terms of our young people and our young teenagers and youths, there's a lot happening in Ireland. There's huge interest in youth services, in creating services that are effective and efficient, that are researched, in working on issues like empathy and the roots of empathy, developing our young people's personalities, skills, confidence, encouraging them to be involved in civic engagement. And of course, it's not just about involvement in politics, it's also about involvement in their communities, in civic life, in making a contribution, in being involved in active citizenship. And we see this in some of our big youth organisations like Feroiga and other organisations that work directly with young people. We see an extraordinary richness in what young people are being exposed to now in terms of youth work and contribution to community, being involved in local projects, doing anti-bullying workshops, addressing mental health issues, homophobic issues. Going around the country as Minister for Children and Youth Affairs in the last year and a half, I'm just so excited by what I see young people doing and the level of engagement which they have now in communities. And of course, there's huge personal development involved in that. I'm going to have an opportunity next year when Ireland has the presidency of the EU to take a number of initiatives in relation to young people, civic engagement and youth work. So that, for example, the EU policies are supporting this. We're going to be looking at youth work and the contribution of youth work and the standards that apply in youth work and how they contribute to young people developing their own skills, moving on to employment, education and training. And it's going to be very exciting because as Ireland holds the presidency, I have an opportunity to lead on the discussion about the role of youth work in civic engagement, the role of youth work in developing, for example, entrepreneurship in young people. And just recently I heard a very striking presentation that talked about, you won't make an entrepreneur at 30, you make an entrepreneur at 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 and 12 and 13 years of age. That's when you need to be supporting young people to be entrepreneurs. And I think youth work offers a great opportunity to do that. So we will have an international conference in Ireland in March, bringing together the best thinking in Europe about these issues. We will have a conference of experts together later in the year in June. And I would invite UNESCO and those of you attending the conference to be involved in whatever way you think is appropriate in that thinking at EU level and in Ireland during the presidency, because it's a great opportunity for us to develop our thinking about how best to work with young people. And we do need to do this because if you look at some of the challenges facing young people in Europe and beyond, one of our big challenges in Europe is about those very issues around employment, education and training, and that cohort of young people who are outside all of that. That's hugely challenging for every one of us. It's challenging for me, and I'm sure for everyone in the room. This challenge of how do we work with the young people who are so marginalised at the moment? How do we create the kind of services, give them the opportunity for civic engagement, the opportunities for training, for employment? And how can the work that we do with these young people in youth work and other services be that bridge to those opportunities for our young people? It's a great challenge, but I think there's huge opportunity there as well for us. In Ireland, we're very fortunate that one of the issues and initiatives that's given an impetus to much of the work that we're doing has come from philanthropy, for example, Atlantic Philanthropy. We've been very lucky to have the support for a lot of new and innovative programmes with young people from philanthropy, and it has made a huge difference because it's encouraged us to be innovative, to try new projects. It has supported the development of those new projects with a research basis as well, which is really important because we really need to think, and I know going forward you will be discussing the kind of projects that need support. And I would say, for example, that one of the groups that we need to think more and more about are those marginalised young people in all our societies, those young people that the formal education system simply does not reach. For those young people, for example, who get expelled from school, it can be very difficult to find a way forward. And I think we really need to be examining very innovative practices in terms of, at a very early stage, identifying those young people who are not attending school, because it's a real first sign of problems. But for those young people who really are totally alienated from the school system, let's really think in a very innovative and research-based way about how we work with those young people, how youth work engages with them, how we can get the services to really find those young people, engage with them and continue to work with them, because they are the most vulnerable group. They are the group who will probably go on to experiment with drugs and alcohol. And if we can really find those innovative ways of working with them, it really will make a difference. One of the issues that emerges again and again in my work as Minister for Children and Youth Affairs, and I think preoccupies all policymakers and practitioners, such as all of you here today, is how do we do the kind of cross-departmental work and cross-agency work that is necessary if we are to really effectively reach out to young people. For example, the setting up of my own Department of Children and making it a cabinet position was very much about doing that cross-departmental work. And I think in many governments around the world, we haven't really yet invented the ways in which departments work together. And we know if we're to reach out to our young people, our young teenagers, it's about different departments and agencies working together. It's about the departments of education and health and sport and environment, for example, amongst others, really working effectively together. So I think one of the areas in the future that we need to examine much more, and I would really invite UNESCO to help us with this, is to think about what are the models that we need to create in modern government structures that effectively do this. Because we do think very often in silos and separate departments and separate agencies. And what's very clear from all of the reports that I get, that very often you have many agencies working with young people or working in communities. But what we need is better cross-departmental, cross-agency work, pooling of resources, especially at a time of economic difficulty. So I think the models and the innovative ideas that would help us to do this would be very welcome. And certainly I would be prepared to play my role as Minister for Children and Youth Affairs in Ireland with UNESCO. And I know that the UNESCO professors here, both in Belfast and in Galway, would be very interested in doing this as well. And I know that Ireland, that we will play our role in these initiatives that you are taking forward. One of the ways I'm approaching the development of our initiatives in relation to children and young people in Ireland is to develop an approach to each part of the life stage, if you like, so that, for example, I've set up an early years group for the first time in Ireland, looking at national policy around those very early years, looking at the childhood years and the adolescent years, and looking at policy in each of those areas, and then having a whole of government approach to each of those, and making sure that my government colleagues and other departments are involved in the development of that policy. And of course, a very important part of our work is the participation of young people. Article 12 of the Convention, giving voice to young people. And we've made a lot of progress in that regard. As I said earlier, we're now going to put that into the Constitution, which is a real step forward to ensure that the voices of young people are heard so that they can become more effective citizens. But equally, we've developed a lot of innovative ways in which young people are being consulted at local level and at national level. We're creating more and more space to hear the voice of young people. And it does take getting used to, I think. It's not always as easy as people think it is. And even if we're committed to it at a theoretical level, making it happen in practice takes practice. You've got to get into it and start doing it, creating those spaces. So we have a youth parliament, we have county structures where young people get together and talk about problems in their own county area. And also, obviously, in the youth work services, the whole participation, the direct participation of young people, of course, is what in the longer term makes them effective citizens and gives them the opportunity. But they have to be very directly deciding on that practice that really can change their lives. A very practical example of it I had just a few days ago was where we had a meeting with young people who've been in the care system, and a new organisation that has been founded to give them a voice directly about their experiences in the care system and their suggestions for improvement in the care system. And it was a very powerful morning to hear the voices directly of young people who'd been in care and their suggestions for changing how the state services had dealt with them. And it was a very refreshing morning and a very positive morning. And it was the kind of morning that people might have been nervous about before. But giving that voice was really important, and that was a really good practice. And at the end of the day, when you're out there in the field, the policy is about seeing the practice really in action and seeing the initiatives that people are taking as a result of the policy development and the research. And it's great to see the initiatives that are taking place in Ireland and internationally that give young people more voice.